The episode begins following the aftermath of what happened at the Human-Mutant Relations Summit, where former NSA agent Henry Gyrich cruelly shot Professor Charles Xavier. The X-Men carry on with Charles's legacy to protect young mutants from being exploited for their powers. Mercenaries take Roberto D'Acosta to an abandoned factory after discovering he has powers. Although showing no resistance, his captors put him on an inhibitor collar to prevent him from fighting back. He tried to bribe them with money coming from a well-off family, but they turned him down when suddenly the atmosphere changed. Storm breaks in through the roof, demanding their surrender. But when they refuse and start shooting at her with sentinel blasters, Bishop storms in and shoots back at them. Cyclops shows up to provide backup, but is shocked to discover a sentinel arm and wonders where the Friends of Humanity got them. At the Xavier Institute, Cyclops criticizes Gambit for not showing up and worries that Storm and Bishop could have been hurt. Rogue defends Gambit while Morph heats the tension, transforming into Professor X. A pregnant Jean Grey walks in and breaks the fighting. She reminds everyone to stop bickering with each other and act as role models for the younger students. Cyclops and Jean Grey later meet with United Nations liaison Dr. Valerie Cooper to find out where the Friends of Humanity got their hands on Sentinel technology. Dr. Cooper explains that they have destroyed all the Sentinel technology they confiscated, but reveals that Bolivar Trask suddenly went missing. She claims they'd need a master mold factory to keep making Sentinels, which the X-Men destroyed years ago. After their call with Dr. Cooper, Jean Grey confronts him and suggests leaving the team with a new baby coming. Cyclops refuses, explaining how they need to be there, especially now without the professor. Jean explains that the team will be able to handle themselves even without them there to watch over them. Roberto later wakes up at the Xavier Institute in a lab after Beast checks him for injuries from the last fight. He insists on leaving, but Cyclops and Storm advise otherwise, claiming his life to be in danger. Jubilee decides to show him around and takes him inside the Danger Room, a holographic training room where the X-Men train to fight. When he doesn't sound impressed, Wolverine shows up and scares him into running away. Cyclops orders Wolverine to bring Roberto back, but he refuses, which Jean otherwise convinces. Rogue, Gambit, and Jubilee accompany him while Cyclops and the others visit the prison to talk with the man who killed Charles, Henry Gyrich. Wolverine and the others track Roberto to a rave party downtown. With Wolverine struggling with too many scents in the area, they split up to look for him. Rogue feels envious of couples dancing and kissing, which she cannot do, but Gambit reassures her that everything will be okay. Morph talks to Wolverine about his altercation with Cyclops for bossing them around. He quickly transforms into Jean and messes with him, claiming to have noticed his pinning gaze at her. Wolverine suspects she and Cyclops will eventually leave the team, especially now that the baby is coming. Wolverine signals the others of the Mercs' arrival and discreetly handles them while Jubilee tries to convince Roberto to return with them. Cyclops and Storm confront Henry to get him to reveal where Trask is hiding. Cyclops claims he can get his sentence shortened in exchange for his help, but Henry sternly objects to his proposal. He commends Cyclops for trying to convince him, but he is unlike Professor X, who would patiently reason with him. So instead, he asks Jean to use Cerebro to amplify her powers to reach into Henry's mind and force him to reveal what he is hiding. Using her psychic powers, she discovers that he has helped Trask create a backup master mold in the desert. The X-Men quickly head to the Sahara Desert, where Jean discovers that the backup master mold is. When Cyclops and Wolverine were bickering against each other as usual, a giant sentinel suddenly attacked the Blackbird, forcing it to crash. It tried to take Cyclops, but he destroyed it with his powers. While they are falling in the sky, Storm, Rogue, and Morph catch the others in the air while Cyclops uses his powers to land on the ground safely. Cyclops tries to convince Trask to surrender, but when he refuses, the X-Men quickly find themselves surrounded by Sentinels. The X-Men quickly jump into action, with Rogue using her super strength to overpower the Sentinels while Wolverine does what he does best, cutting them all up. Beast jumps inside one of the Sentinels to control it, while Gambit and Bishop fire at them with their powers. As more Sentinels show up, Cyclops calls in for reinforcement, and Storm creates a tornado to blow their enemies away. With the Master Mold left, Wolverine charges at it, with Gambit using his powers on his claws, while Morph gives him a boost to blow it up with one attack. The UN soldiers arrive to confiscate and dispose of the remnants of the Sentinel technology. Dr. Cooper commends Cyclops for capturing Trask, but he gives the credit to his team. When everything is over, Jubilee talks to Roberto, who insists on returning home. He later reveals his power to Jubilee and explains how his parents don't even know he is a mutant. He worries that they would discredit him, and how using his powers reminded him of how he continues to lie to his parents, hence why he never used it when the enemy kidnapped him. Later, the X-Men play basketball, but Cyclops has a big announcement for them before they do. Wolverine suspects that they are leaving the team to raise their kid, but Jean claims that they aren't leaving. Suddenly, the alarms go off in the professor's old office, where they find a much older Magneto. It turns out that in Professor Xavier's last will and testament, Magneto has inherited all of the professor's belongings, including the school and the X-Men, much to everyone's dismay. Cyclops and the others still couldn't believe Professor X entrusted the X-Men to Magneto. The X-Men heard the news about how former mutant terrorist Magneto had been going around saving people, which was quite uncharacteristic of him. After saving people from what seems to be a Coney Island incident, he quickly saved the Morlocks in the sewers after mercenaries tried to detain and steal from them. Despite the inhumane treatment, Magneto shockingly restrains himself from using his powers on them. At an X-Men meeting, the others raise their concern at the shocking revelation, to which, unlike the others, Rogue suggests giving Magneto the benefit of the doubt. Magneto later walks in on them and claims that he had arranged transport for the Morlocks to arrive at the mutant nation Genosha. Still suspicious of Magneto, Cyclops suggests having Jean read his mind, to which she sternly objects, explaining how it would be an inaccurate and unethical assessment of Magneto's intentions. Storm points out their struggle to believe him, as he has been their longest rival since the beginning. Later, Jean confides in Storm about how she worries that the baby being born as a mutant will guarantee him a life full of struggles and hopes it will be born human. Storm comforts her, saying that it is always something mutants dream of. But instead of wallowing in despair, she focuses on the good things that it has brought her and became part of the X-Men because of it. Rogue sneaks into Magneto's office, trying to share her approval in joining them, but advises that instead of demanding their trust, he should find a way to earn it. Rogue explains how she understands what he is going through, claiming to come from a troubled past. After hearing of Magneto's shocking rescues, Dr. Cooper grows suspicious and assembles a team to arrest him. She leads UN soldiers to the Xavier Institute to apprehend Magneto. She explains how they have come prepared with anti-electromagnetic rifles resistant to Magneto's powers. He proves that he isn't threatened the least when he turns the steel helicopters they came in against them. Cooper still tries to take him in peacefully to answer for his crimes against humanity and to stand trial at a UN headquarters. Although he suspects otherwise, Magneto willingly surrenders to what he believes would be subject to anything but a fair trial. The next day, the X-Men show up for trial to ensure that Magneto behaves while the humans protest, insisting on having Magneto pay for his crimes. Outside, a masked vigilante called the Executioner prepares to storm inside, carrying heavy weaponry that will take down Magneto for good. Meanwhile, Magneto defends his actions against a board of judges and before everyone else. He explains how his actions only protected his kind, the mutants, from the unjust treatment they had been forced to live with. He claims that, like humans, he too was acting to avenge his fellow mutants from indignation and harsh environments. Suddenly, protesters finally breached the perimeter and the guards struggled to fend them off. While Cyclops and the others help quell the protesters, Storm stays behind to protect Magneto and the judges whom the protesters are also after. While the others are on standby, Cyclops creates a barricade. Executioner breaks through the wall and single-handedly defeated the X-Men. He takes out Beast and Gambit with a Sentinel blaster, slaps an inhibitor collar on Bishop, and then shoots him from behind. He even manages to take down Cyclops, who knocks off his visored monocle and beats him up. When he is about to finish him off, Morph comes to his rescue, which Executioner struggles to defeat because of his transforming powers. While Wolverine watches everything on TV at the Xavier Institute, Jean asks him to take her to the hospital as she is already in labor. A rattled Wolverine haphazardly drives through town while Jean uses her powers to keep the citizens off the road. She then calls out to Cyclops, claiming that the baby is coming. Storm urges him to go to her, asking Rogue to fly him to the hospital while she defends Magneto and the judges. When they finally arrive, they find Wolverine arguing with a doctor who refuses to deliver the baby, given that Jean is a mutant. Cyclops suggests Rogue use her powers to siphon the doctor's medical expertise and deliver the baby. Rogue sternly objects, worried that she may touch the baby and drain him, but Jean convinces her otherwise. When the protesters finally break through and reach the trial hall, Magneto uses his powers to create a force field against the enemy's bullets. He then used his magnetism to create steel rods to keep them inside with Storm's help. Storm notices Executioner taking a shot at Magneto and jumps in front of him to protect him. She falls to the ground, weak and powerless, infuriating Magneto, so he takes Executioner and the judges to the sky. After showing them how helpless they are before him, Magneto controls himself not to take it out on them and shows mercy to the humans, albeit unworthy. He explains how he is trying to change and live up to the memory and expectations of his dear friend. Later, the UN liaison, Dr. Cooper, speaks to the reporters about how the judges have decided to pardon Magneto for his previous transgressions against humanity. She also explained how they are considering Genosha becoming a member of the United Nations. Meanwhile, Jean safely gives birth to a healthy baby boy, Nathan Charles Summers, whom they name. With Magneto proving himself to be a man of his word, Cyclops claims that he is now confident in leaving the team in his hands, trusting what Professor X had in mind when he had Magneto inherit the X-Men. Beast gave Storm the unfortunate news that what has happened to her appears to be permanent, much to their dismay. Storm later leaves the mansion, but not before leaving a letter for Jean to say goodbye to in her stead for the team. Rogue revisits Magneto at night, to which both share a connection as they hold hands, and he appears to be all right. Gambit is heartbroken to find Rogue leaving Magneto's office, while Morph comforts a depressed Wolverine after learning that Jean and Cyclops are leaving. While Jean reads Storm's letter, they suddenly hear the front door ringing, which they shockingly discover is a worn-out Jean Grey asking for the X-Men. With the sudden appearance of Jean's doppelganger, Jean then uses her powers to see through her memories, which appear to be fragments of their past. Beast informs them that after a series of tests, he concurs that the doppelganger appears to be the real Jean Grey, while the current one they have seems to be her clone. She insists she is the real Jean Grey, fully recollecting her memories, unlike the doppelganger, who only had fragments. She turns to Cyclops, but later walks out on them when he is unsure and fails to defend her. She returns to her room when baby Nathan suddenly gets restless while she is in deep thought. Cyclops walks in and offers to take him, but she refuses and asks him to go. As soon as he left, she suddenly heard a sinister voice from the walkie-talkie who introduced himself as Mr. Sinister and said he had created her. He reveals his master plan to her and admits she is only a clone. She initially resists him, but eventually gives in to her desires and awakens to her evil side. She then lashes out and uses her powers on everyone, creating horrific illusions from their fears. Back at the lab, Beast discovers the workings of Mr. Sinister and urges Cyclops to find Nathan before it's too late. They try to check into Jean's room, but later find it empty while illusions created by the clone attack the rest of the X-Men. They later gathered in the hall when they suddenly fell into hell with demons crawling and flying all over the place. When they finally defeat all of them thanks to Cyclops and Bishop's coordinated attack, Sentinels suddenly emerge from the lava. The real Jean shows up and breaks the illusion, later collapsing after pushing herself. Later, the clone appears before them with Nathan and introduces herself as the Goblin Queen. When Cyclops tries to stop her from leaving, she uses her powers to knock them all out. Rogue and Magneto return after a session in the Danger Room, who appear unaffected by the clone's powers. Morph explains how Mr. Sinister had been experimenting on mutants since the 1800s, stealing their DNA to enhance himself and become immortal. Having learned of the situation, Magneto insists on leading the team to take out Mr. Sinister and save Nathan while Wolverine, Beast, and Rogue stay behind to tend to the wounded. Having been previously experimented with, Morph leads them to where Mr. Sinister's lab is. They later find themselves the Goblin Queen waiting for them. When Cyclops tries to reason with her, she uses her powers to blast him away, while mind-controlling Morph to attack Bishop. Magneto confronts Jean with his powers, pulling in metal bars from the windows, but Jean overpowers him when she showers him with broken glass, attacking him from every direction. Cyclops recovers and hesitatingly attacks her while she responds by controlling his body and mind. Meanwhile, Jean suffers, struggling to control her powers. Wolverine talks her into controlling it, and she discovers that Cyclops is in danger. Despite her insistence, Beast cautions her otherwise, claiming her body is in no condition to fight. She then projects herself to attack the Goblin Queen and pulls her to her mind where she can overpower her. When she refuses to give up, Jean shows her the memory of when they first met Professor X. She vividly remembers how her best friend's death awakened her to her powers. The clone still refuses to give up and resists Jean's attempts to help her when they are suddenly pulled to the memory of her giving birth to Nathan. With it, she can overcome Mr. Sinister's mind control and urges Cyclops to help her save their son. While Mr. Sinister puts baby Nathan inside a glass chamber, Cyclops and the clone attack him. Cyclops blasts the glass chamber and takes out baby Nathan while Mr. Sinister escapes, but not before warning them that they have already doomed their baby. Beast explains how Nathan was exposed to a deadly strain of the techno-organic virus in the hopes of making him invincible. He explains how it would take him months and even years to develop a cure, a time which Nathan does not have with the virus spreading rapidly. The clone suggests that a cure may be readily available in the future, in Bishop's time. Bishop explains that his bracelet only has enough power for him and Nathan to travel to the future. Cyclops strongly objects, worried that his son will feel abandoned by his parents, but the clone explains that she will ensure he doesn't. She then uses her powers to leave a memory for their son, describing the situation before Bishop took him to the future. Later, the clone leaves the mansion, to which Jean tries to stop her. She explains how it is unfair for them to live as Jean Grey when they are unsure when Mr. Sinister swapped them. With that said, she claims she wanted to start a new life as Madeline Pryor. Jean later confronts Cyclops to resolve the issues between them. Storm is drinking at a bar in Texas when a man named Forge approaches her. He claims to be an old friend of Professor X and extends his help to get her powers back, much to her relief. Gambit tries to woo Rogue at breakfast, but his efforts are in vain when Magneto grows suspiciously close to her. Magneto orders the X-Men to show up in the danger room to keep training for when Mr. Sinister resurfaces. Beast requests that they exclude Jubilee so she can enjoy her birthday, much to the others agreeing. Jubilee walks in and suggests they spend her birthday at the arcade. She later returns to her room and complains to Roberto, implying that Magneto refused her request. While talking about video games, she suddenly notices a Nintendo in her room, which she claims isn't hers. Suddenly, the video game starts up, and mechanical arms show up to attack them. Roberto and Jubilee later wake up in her room without remembering what happened. Suddenly, a sentinel breaks into her room and grabs Roberto. Jubilee knocks down the sentinel to save him, but wonders how they are suddenly downtown. When more sentinels show up, Jubilee uses her powers to fend them off when the Friends of Humanity start shooting at them. Back to a corner, they suddenly hear a phone ringing, which she suspects is a trap. When Roberto answered the phone, they were suddenly teleported to early Genosha. She explains how she was previously trapped there with Storm and Gambit, back when Bolivar Trask enslaved the mutants to do his bidding. Out of nowhere, soldiers show up, shooting at them. As they were fleeing, a masked mutant showed up to save them. When she tries talking to him, an invisible barrier stops her, and Jubilee realizes they are inside a video game. Coming to the realization, the evil mastermind reveals himself to them and introduces himself as Mojo, an interdimensional alien TV producer who feeds off on ratings. He explains how he puts the X-Men through overly complicated traps to entertain his indentured audiences. When his show gets to an unprecedented low rating, Mojo decides to focus on video games and pulls Jubilee to be the star of his show, where every level is based on her memories. When Roberto suggests refusing to play the game, Mojo explains that dying in it is like dying in real life. Mojo then convinces Jubilee to play along, having to replay the golden hits of her memories and forever be young in this world. That said, they are quickly thrust into different levels of the game, starting with fighting the Sentinels in downtown New York. They then later fight off mutants in Savage Land from the time when the X-Men fought with Sauron and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Sauron catches Jubilee off guard and takes her life points away when suddenly a glitch reappears to save her. Mojo gets furious and demands Spiral to fix the glitch. The duo is thrust into the final stage where they face off against Magneto in his old base. When Roberto tries to convince her to find a way out, he gets zapped, losing all his life points. Suddenly, she faces Magneto alone, which she skillfully defeats. When Roberto is about to disappear, Jubilee finds an extra life in the rubble she uses on him. Suddenly, an arm breaks through the screen and grabs them. Jubilee and Roberto suddenly find themselves before the masked mutant who saved them in game version Genosha. When Roberto suspects him to be in league with Mojo, he removes his helmet to reveal an older version of Jubilee. She explained how having Jubilee go through endless trial loops was risky, so Mojo created digital replicas of her to beta test the game. Before Mojo killed off the beta, Digital Jubilee discovered a glitch she used to escape deletion. Suddenly, Mojo catches up to them and initiates a boss fight with the two Jubilees. The two Jubilees then hold hands and combine their powers to defeat Mojo once and for all. When Mojo is defeated, Spiral walks up from behind with a smirk, suggesting she had a hand in his defeat. Jubilee and Roberto return to the real world, and she kisses him. Meanwhile, Storm follows Forge back to his home, hopeful that he can restore her powers. Forge explains how he can get parts of the brain that are normally dormant in humans. By drawing up a connection and seeing how these parts fit, he can fix them much like you would complete a Rubik's Cube. When Storm gets curious, Forge explains how he used to be a soldier until he lost his limbs. Hoping to cheer her up, Forge takes Storm horseback riding. She is briefly lifted after seeing a magnificent view, but quickly returns to being gloomy after recognizing the same owl whom she claims is stuck, like her. They later return to his home, and he claims to have had a breakthrough in the machine he is making. He explains how making an inverted version of the radiation that took her powers was not the answer, but instead, creating a machine that could safely channel such power would. After putting her in the machine, Storm tries to call out her powers but fails, and she breaks down in tears. Storm was furious when she discovered that Forge used to work for the Defense Department on neutralizing dangerous mutants. Although he didn't create the inhibitor collars the government uses, it was still based on his earlier designs. He explains how she is perfect even without her powers, but she claims he only thinks of her as the perfect redemption. As she rides away, she is suddenly pulled back into Forge's house, which they discover is the work of a demon. Forge tries to fight it off, but is sent flying away, and it captures Storm. The demon introduces itself as the adversary who feeds on misery. With the world turning over to a new age, hopefully accepting mutants into society, reporter Trish Tilby visits the X-Men in the Xavier Institute to interview the people who had been the foundation of this good reputation. Beast, Jubilee, and even Cyclops were interviewed, who later had a breakdown before walking out. Jean sneaks out, unable to handle an interview while trying to figure out her past. Wolverine finds her at the lake sorting through her memories, to which she inadvertently kisses him, being drawn by her past feelings. She explains to Wolverine how she chose to stay behind despite wanting to explore the cosmos after realizing her feelings for Cyclops. She is later furious to discover that Madeline and Cyclops have been secretly talking telepathically for a month. He explains how he is still grieving and that only Madeline could understand. She accuses him of still being in love with her clone and tells him to chase her to Genosha rather than stay behind to work on their relationship. Suddenly, Jean falls to her knees after seeing a vision from Madeline. Meanwhile, Gambit accompanies Magneto and Rogue, who accepts an invitation to a gala in Genosha. Gambit was surprised to find a much different Genosha from what he could remember when they were last trapped there. They were thrilled to find Madeline Pryor, who made it into Genosha's interim council. She explained how the council wanted an X-Men in their ranks. Madeline then asks if Magneto could meet with the council before the gala, leaving Gambit and Rogue to get reacquainted with Genosha resident Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler confronts Gambit, who notices the pinning gazes he has been giving Rogue, and advises him to confess his feelings for her. He worries that it might not be what Rogue is looking for, but Nightcrawler explains that love is best measured in their actions. The council meets with Magneto and suggests making them their leader, who credits everything they have to him and Charles's efforts. With Professor X gone, they believe that only he can fill the role, to which he recalls the time he and Charles talked about one day having the world accept them into society. He eventually agrees under the condition that X-Men's Rogue accompany him in leading Genosha. He later breaks the news to her, but she initially refuses. It was only when Magneto explained how she would make for a fine leader having to feel other people's pain. Before the gala, Rogue explains to Gambit that she intends to take up Magneto's offer, believing this could be the best for everyone. She then reveals her troubled past when she first met Magneto and how they soon became a couple. She claims that Magneto's powers shield him from hers, letting her touch him without draining him. One day she finally realized that they weren't meant to be, as they both have painful pasts that they can't run away from. Gambit reluctantly accepts her decision and goes to the gala alone. Heartbroken, Gambit drowns his sorrows at the bar when Rogue arrives and is escorted by Magneto, suggesting that she accepted his request. Seeing them holding hands and dancing was too painful for him to see that he walked out. Suddenly, Madeline is hit with a psychic message and has a nosebleed. She walks out to gather some fresh air when he finds Cable telling everyone to turn down the music. She later realized that Cable was their son, that they sent away with Bishop to be cured in the future. He is later pulled back to the future, but not before apologizing to his mother for the things to come, when suddenly, a massive explosion occurred in Genosha. When Rogue regains consciousness, she quickly finds people in panic as a giant sentinel shoots out explosive beams everywhere. Before Rogue and Magneto get hit with an attack, Nightcrawler teleports them but gets hit before he does. Gambit explains how too many mutants have already died while the Morlocks are still stuck in the center of it all. As it lays waste to many of his kind, Magneto rises and distracts the giant sentinel towards him while Gambit and Rogue rush to the Morlocks, who still need help. Rogue and Gambit are able to clear a path toward them using their powers, while Magneto furiously avenges the deaths of so many mutants. As they escort the Morlocks to safety, Magneto comes crashing down, unable to hold the giant sentinel by itself. Detecting high-level energy, the giant sentinel attacks Magneto while he tries to defend himself with an electromagnetic barrier. Unable to keep it for long, Rogue tries to save him, but Magneto forcibly stops her from throwing her life away. Eventually, the giant sentinel overpowers and defeats him. Mourning their deaths, Rogue charges at the giant sentinel, but Gambit knocks her down, to which he instead charges at it alone. The giant sentinel stabs Gambit, but being so close allows him to blow it up with his powers, making the ultimate sacrifice to stop the wild sentinel. In the aftermath, Rogue mourns a lifeless Gambit who suffered fatal wounds in that last attack. Following the attack of a demon on Storm, it refuses to finish her off until she is met with the ultimate misery. Storm tries to nurse Forge back to health, but its wounds are deeper than it seems. Adversary lingers around, convincing Storm to leave Forge behind. When Storm refuses to give up, the adversary attacks her with her fear of confined spaces and uses illusions to trap her in her mind. Storm starts to crack up and break down when Forge uses magic to banish the demon, which he claims inherited desert magic from his mother. With his condition worsening, she wonders if his mother wrote a cure for the demon's bite. Forge claims that his mother wrote about a particular cactus called the Midnight Cholla, which is said to be quite a powerful magic medicine. He explains that it grows in a nearby cave where it doesn't need sunlight. When he claims to show her the way, Storm advises him against it as he is too weak to move around. He insists on going otherwise, scared of dying alone. Riding in the desert carrying a weakened Forge, they finally arrived at the Snow Snake Tower, where the cactus is said to grow. He explains how the Union used to store weapons there during the Civil War. He claims that he overheard the adversary convincing her to leave him, but she refused. She explains how she has seen the terror in her powers and thinks that losing her powers was for the best. When he could no longer keep walking, he pointed her in the direction she needed to go. After learning about her fear of confined spaces, he explains how he wanted to accompany her. As she slowly climbs the steep caves in search of the cactus, adversary returns and attacks Storm with her mind. When it seems as if the fear swallows her, Storm comes out and faces it, awakening her powers and defeating the demon. They then return to Forge's home, where she treats his wounds with the cactus extract, which quickly heals them. Excited, having regained her powers, she turns on the TV to see the aftermath of what happened at Genosha. Meanwhile, in outer space, the Shi'ar attack Ronan and his army to defeat the one called the Supreme Intelligence. The Imperial Guard quickly defeated them and forced Ronan to submission. Deathbird leads the Shi'ar army against their enemies and demands Ronan surrender his leader. Suddenly, they are interrupted by an announcement from her sister, Lilandra, the Empress of the Shi'ar Empire. She quickly tells them she will be wed to Charles Xavier after going to great lengths to heal him from certain death. She greatly praises his accomplishments in helping defeat his brother, the previous Shi'ar Emperor Deken, and the insatiable Phoenix. When Lilandra presents Charles to everyone, her chancellor tries to speak his mind, troubled by her decision when Deathbird shows up and objects to their union. She explains that binding their all-powerful Shi'ar to an alliance with Earth would be the biggest mistake. She then pleads with the Council and invokes the Rite of Madasha, a tradition for non-Shi'ar to pass a test of loyalty to wed a royal member of the Empire. Charles accepts, which she claims is a challenge of her own choosing. To ensure that they are protected from his earthly ties, she asks him to renounce Earth and erase all memories he has, which shocked everyone at the request. Lilandra explains that a psychic of his caliber will not be a small feat to erase, to which Deathbird suggests that the Empress herself do it. Later, Charles contemplates before a statue of their gods Shera and Kithri when Gladiator walks in on him. He explains how they were once enemies but were forced to marry to bring harmony to the universe. Although their kind admonishes art, this is the core of their principles, and is thus bound to their culture for intergalactic peace and harmony. Charles questions their belief in unity if the other half must be erased for the sake of the whole. Gladiator refuses to respond to him, claiming that idealism is a form of insanity. Lilandra walks in on them and wonders if he has truly made a decision. She worries that they would never allow them to be together should he refuse unless she forfeits the throne. They suspect this is Deathbird's plan, which could be disastrous for the entire galaxy. Feeling grateful for the life she has given him, Charles decides to accept the challenge. Prepared for the Madasha, Charles kneels before the council to go over his decision. When he struggles to renounce his X-Men, Deathbird arrives and criticizes him for failing to see it through. Lilandra explains that what they are asking is no small thing. When Deathbird brazenly challenges her sister, Lilandra accuses her of sedition and demands Gladiator take them out. With the Shi'ar fighting against each other and the council walking away, Charles decides to use his powers to pull them into the astral plane for a talk. He points out that the Shi'ar draws its might from destroying other worlds that may stand up to them in the future. They attack them while the enemy is young and force them to submit. While trying to convince the council, he suddenly sees a vision of Gambit's death. Fearing the worst, he demands to return to Earth, even if he has to abandon his love for Lilandra. Somewhere, Bolivar Trask is fleeing from Mr. Sinister, who appears responsible for the attack on Genosha. It is a sad day as the X-Men mourn the loss of a fallen comrade, Gambit, whom they finally lay to rest. Jubilee wonders why Rogue never showed up for the funeral when Gambit risked his life to save everyone, including hers. Wolverine comforts her, while Nightcrawler explains that everyone has their own way of grieving and that Rogue is battling her own demons. Rogue single-handedly attacks an undercover U.S. military base in search of Bolivar Trask and Henry Gyrich, who she suspects were responsible for the Rogue Sentinel in Genosha. U.S. Commander Ross is confident that Rogue would be unable to break through their defenses, which were built to withstand even the Hulk, but she has proven otherwise. Following the lead she got, she makes her way to an abandoned underground facility where Captain America tries to convince her to stand down. He explains how he was sent to track down Bolivar Trask. He shares that Gyrich was recently transferred out of U.S. custody by a covert division of the UN to a facility in Mexico. Worried that Captain America would get in her way, Rogue steals his shield and throws it far away. She then flies to Mexico to find Gyrich living comfortably in a classified top-secret resort. Rogue confronts Gyrich and forcibly uses her powers to get the information from his head, but instead, she blacks out. Meanwhile, Cyclops is contacting his political connections for relief and recovery efforts in the aftermath of the mutant massacre in Genosha. The X-Men are forced to go at it alone with the other nations, worried about an incoming war with the mutants. Jean and Cyclops continue searching for survivors while the others tend to the wounded and help with the relief support. While Jean feels all of the death echoes and the pain, Cyclops is worried for Madeline. Suddenly, Jean gets a psychic reading, which appears to be that of a telepath. They find that Emma Frost has awakened to diamond transmutation powers when they dig them up. Out of nowhere, the X-Men receive a call from Trask, who reveals that Mr. Sinister orchestrated the attack after he manipulated him. When the X-Men refuse to believe him, Trask asks them to visit the UN Peace Legion in Madripoor. The X-Men run into an unconscious rogue whom Nightcrawler found. Together, they go to where Trask asks them to meet and are shocked to discover technology that is light years ahead of theirs. He confesses to inadvertently helping Mr. Sinister to create the wild sentinel that attacked Genosha. He claims to be manipulated by him and refuses to be an accomplice to so much evil that he decides to take his own life. When he tries to jump to his death, Rogue stops him, but when he has nothing else to give, she drops him. While trying to explain her actions, Trask gets back up and transforms into a new kind of sentinel, who then blows up Rogue, much to everyone's shock. Nightcrawler teleports Rogue to safety while Jean and Cyclops handle the collapsing building. Morph transforms into Quicksilver, but his lightning-fast jabs are ineffective against it. It quickly took out Morph, Wolverine, and Beast in one hit. Jean tries to fight him with her powers, but it quickly overwhelms her. Cyclops attacked him at full power, but it withstood his optic blast, to which he was then pinned to the ground. When everything seems lost, Cable comes to the rescue with an electromagnetic cluster grenade, which takes down Trask. Jean discovers that Cable is Nathan Summers, their son, to which he admits. He reveals that Mr. Sinister is working for someone worse, and urges them to defeat him before everything is lost. Mr. Sinister complains to Bastion about revealing his plans to the X-Men, but he reassures him that everything is going according to plan. He explains that the earlier fight provided him with invaluable data that would allow him to finish his masterpiece. It turns out that they've uncovered a damaged alien satellite, and they discover that Charles Xavier is very much alive and consorting with the Shi'ar Empire. Later, it was revealed that Bastion had captured Magneto, who demanded that he submit to him. The X-Men return to the Xavier Institute, where Cyclops worries that Cable has been avoiding him. Jean explains how Cable told Beast that he was separated from Bishop in the time stream and landed alone in the future. Later, Cable reveals their enemy, a supervillain named Bastion. In his original timeline, he explains how Bastion used the fallout in Genosha to receive backing for the Sentinel program. He also adds that the Prime Sentinels he's been working on are created using the same techno-organic virus that Mr. Sinister subjected him to as a baby. Beast fears that these Prime Sentinels have become living weapons capable of giving birth to a new apex species designed to replace mutants. When they thought it would be like your typical dystopian world, Cable corrects them and claims that his world is a utopia. Bastion saved humanity by upgrading them while the surviving mutants were forced to work, ushering in a bright and peaceful future for the humans. Wolverine was furious that Cable didn't stop Genosha, but he explained that every time he tried, he was temporarily pulled away before it happened. Beast suspects that these must be absolute points, which are events that occur across all timelines. Cable claims that he came across information on one of Bastion's facilities in their time and hopes to defeat him once and for all. He suspects that Bastion is a backup android that Master Mold uploaded after they took it down. Dr. Cooper, revealed to be working for Bastion, is furious about being left in the dark about the attack on Genosha. It was later revealed that Bastion had been conspiring with other supervillains like Dr. Doom and Helmut Zemo. Bastion explains how Genosha wasn't intended to be genocide, but more of time management, and reveals that in 10 years, mutants would outnumber humans. Sooner or later, it would lead to human extinction, so he worked hard to complete Operation Zero Tolerance. He claims that the flaw in Trask's Sentinels was they were too obvious that mutants would see them coming from a mile away, and that he needed a more discreet but deadlier version. He then reveals his plan of turning willing humans into sleeper Sentinel agents at his beck and call. Dr. Cooper worries that Bastion has turned the civilians into weapons in his fight against the mutants. Cyclops, Jean, and Cable fly to Harmony, Pittsburgh, where Beast suspects it is one of Bastion's facilities. Jean quickly realizes that this was no facility but where Bastion grew up. While checking for clues, they run into Bastion's mother, who waits for her son. Jean figures out that Bastion's father was infected by Nimrod, a sentient being from the future, to create Bastion, a human Sentinel hybrid with technopathic abilities. She claims that he's descended from every Sentinel, from Master Mold to Nimrod, a being that has mutated, evolved, and been born. Bastion's mother walks in on them, looking at Bastion's old drawings, when she suddenly turns into a Sentinel, much to their shock. Just then, all sleeper Sentinel agents worldwide activate to attack the mutants. Jubilee and Roberto get ambushed in a shopping mall, and the Xavier Institute is attacked while Bastion's Sentinels surround Jean, Cyclops, and Cable. Wolverine, Morph, and Nightcrawler defend their home while protecting an unconscious Rogue. Jean, Cyclops, and Cable tried to escape on the Nightbird, but the Sentinel shot it down. They then tried to drive away in a Porsche, but the enemy caught up and circled them. Bastion basks in his victory as he sees the X-Men mansion burning when he receives a message from Sinister, who furiously explains Dr. Cooper released Magneto. Once free, Magneto infuriatingly uses his powers to massively create a blackout and turn down the power all across the globe, consequentially rendering the Sentinels to cease functioning. Wolverine worries that Magneto has finally gone to declare war when suddenly a ship crashes into the ruined Xavier Mansion, which is revealed to be Professor Charles Xavier, who calls his X-Men to gather with him. After brazenly declaring war on humans, Magneto summons a huge chunk of land under the sea to which he plans to build the mutant nation. Storm and Forge come to rescue Roberto and Jubilee, who are chased to an alley by mutant-hating humans. Cyclops and Jean speak with Charles, who criticizes his decision to leave the X-Men to Magneto. Charles explains he only wanted them to have a life that was not bound by their responsibility to lead the X-Men. Cyclops claims that they'd still get pulled into this mess regardless of where they may be. Later, Rogue regains consciousness, much to Nightcrawler's relief. Storm, Forge, Jubilee, and Roberto return to the mansion and are shocked to discover it in ruins. Jean explains how they are relocating to the old base on Muir Island, where they expect the Shi'ar technology to be still functional. Magneto's blackout makes the world panic as massive infrastructures worldwide are in ruins. Even Storm claims that the magnetic field on Earth is dying and suspects the world will end by tomorrow. When they start talking about convincing Magneto, Wolverine worries that he won't listen to them and suggests using force. Charles walks in and asks them to direct their anger towards him instead, claiming blame for what happened. Cyclops tells Rogue that she will go with him and the Blue Team to find and stop Magneto, while Storm and Jean will lead the Gold Team to find Bastion and destroy his headquarters in the Galapagos Islands. Although Beast claims he and Forge can create a scrambling device for Bastion, he explains how he could not find the central command server that controls the Prime Sentinels. Charles reveals that Bastion himself is the command server. He explains how he previously visited a young Bastion after learning of his powers to communicate with machines, but his mother turned him away. He claims that once Bastion is no longer a threat, he believes Magneto will be convinced to reverse what he did. While Beast and Forge work on making the Scrambler to counter Bastion's control of the Prime Sentinels, Charles talks to Rogue by the lake, who is still grieving Gambit's death. Suddenly, Magneto shows up to offer them the chance to join the utopian world that he seeks to create. Charles tries to convince Magneto, but he refuses to listen to him. Magneto blames Charles and his misguided dream of peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans, leading them to this situation. He then beckons the X-Men to join him, which Rogue and Roberto do. While the X-Men gear up, Charles talks to President Kelly to sort things out. President Kelly insists on using the Magneto protocols now that he has gone off the rails, but Charles asks him to give his X-Men time to handle the situation, to which he reluctantly agrees. Jean, Storm, Forge, Morph, Beast, and Cable head to Isla Mirada to take down Bastion while the Prime Sentinels are still down. As they approach the island, Bastion sends out his Sentinels, to which they suspect Bastion must be powering their circuitry through his technopathy. When they struggle to get them off their tail, Storm suggests she and Forge draw the enemy while the others carry on to find Bastion and take him down, to which Jean reluctantly agrees. Storm then continues to summon a massive tornado to throw their enemies off while Jean and the others sneak off the ship to continue on the ground. When they thought they had lost the enemy, Sentinels showed up and they quickly fended them off. Suddenly, Jean gets attacked by Mr. Sinister, but she overwhelms him with her powers. Morph sneaks into the base as Sinister and tries to trick Bastion, but he sees through his disguise. Beast backs him up, but Bastion captures him before he can put the device on him. The Sentinels eventually outnumber them and shoot down the Blackbird, which crashes into the river, while Forge is still inside, much to Storm's dismay. Jean follows Sinister into the forest, where a mind-controlled Cable suddenly attacks her. Cable awakens his latent psychic powers, having been born from one of the most powerful psychic mutants to have ever lived. When Jean struggles to contain Cable's powers, she calls out to Cyclops telepathically. Meanwhile, Cyclops leads the rest of the team to attack Magneto to convince him to undo the damage he did to Earth. When Magneto has no intention of standing down, the X-Men quickly jump into action to take him down. Wolverine brazenly charges at him, but Rogue pins him down. Cyclops and Nightcrawler follow Wolverine, but their attacks can't reach Magneto. When Jubilee tries to attack Magneto, Roberto reluctantly attacks her. Charles then asks his X-Men to focus on removing Magneto's helmet so he can use his psychic powers on him. Wolverine gets blasted away, but not before successfully removing his helmet, to which Charles quickly uses the opportunity to attack him. When Cyclops discovers that Jean's team hasn't defeated Bastion yet, he attacks Charles to buy them more time. Infuriated, Magneto lashes out at them, forcing Charles to wear the helmet to prevent him from using his psychic powers, while the others are pinned to the wall. Wolverine sneaks up and stabs Magneto from behind. Having withstood his attack, Magneto then uses his power to forcibly pull out the adamantium, leaving his body gravely wounded, much to everyone's shock. When Magneto was rampaging, Charles managed to attack him with his psychic powers and showed him the first time they met. At the time, mutants were horrifically discriminated against, and Magneto then was scared into hiding his identity. He later realizes that he has been pulled into the astral plane by Charles, who tries to convince him to restore power to Earth. He continues to refuse his request and explains how he used to tolerate the humans' treatment towards them, only to be rewarded with more injustice towards mutants. Left with no choice, Charles hijacked Magneto's mind and restored power to Earth. Once the power was back on, President Kelly was coerced into activating the Magneto protocols, fearing the huge asteroid floating above them. Meanwhile, Bastion captures the X-Men and explains how, despite their futile efforts, they are faced with the grim truth that they are doomed to a future that is meant to be. Beast explains how his so-called family is nothing but prisoners forced to harbor his hate for mutants. Bastion then sends his Prime Sentinels across the globe to take down important infrastructures under his name. Despite Sinister's objections, Bastion wants to make an example out of Cable, and tries to kill him when Jean, as the Phoenix, emerges from the waters, much to the X-Men's relief. She quickly captures the fleeing Bastion and is forced to wear the scrambler they made to cut off his link to the Sentinels. Sinister confidently confronts Phoenix, but she uses her powers to burn out the stolen mutant DNA in his body, which he uses to stay young and immortal. Sinister scurries away after being turned old, much to the others' amusement. Forced to wear the scrambler, an infuriated Bastion lashes out and tears Cable's mechanical arm, which he absorbs into his body to grow mechanical wings. Tired of everything, Bastion decides to fly towards the huge asteroid to force it to crash into Earth. Charles and Magneto are both unconscious, still trapped in the astral plane that Charles has pulled Magneto into. The X-Men tend to an unconscious Wolverine who barely survived Magneto's attack. Realizing that he has done more harm, Charles calls out to Jean and Cyclops and explains how his attack shattered Magneto's psyche. He needed to restore it before his mind entirely collapsed, to which they'd lose their minds. Jean then informs the X-Men that Bastion will destroy the asteroid's gravity core. When Bastion is about to destroy its core, Rogue pulls him outside and begrudgingly beats him up, still blaming him for Gambit's death. Bastion catches her off guard and pulls her by the neck when Roberto, who now calls himself Sunspot, attacks him with his powers. Neither were strong enough to contain him and were knocked down. Bastion heads back inside, where Nightcrawler, Jubilee, and Cyclops try to stop him but fail. Despite taking the full brunt of Jubilee's attack, Bastion still stands back up with his deformed face. Bastion claims he can always rely on what he calls a family when a huge Sentinel shows up, but is shocked when the X-Men are inside it and Beast is controlling it. As the X-Men make their final stand, Cyclops asks the team to stand down and explains that they must stop fighting the future, which is Bastion. He then tries to convince the error in his belief and claims that even Charles tried to save him when he was young, despite his mother's refusal. While trying to convince Bastion, missiles were headed inbound and hit the huge asteroid they were on. Cyclops worries that President Kelly must have activated the Magneto protocols, which took the asteroid off its orbit. Jubilee falls into space through the cracks, but Roberto catches her and returns to Earth. With no way to stop it from crashing, Cyclops urges the rest of the X-Men to escape while he tries to blow up the entire thing. Suddenly, Beast reckons that if they work together, they might be able to stop it. With that said, Jean uses astral projection and reaches out to Cable, to which she and Cyclops say their final goodbyes. Beast tries to salvage the asteroid's controls, but there has been too much damage for him to keep it afloat. Rogue uses her super strength to stop the asteroid from falling, which Jean and Storm also help with their powers. Eventually, Charles got through to Magneto, and he woke up to pull the asteroid back to outer space when it suddenly disappeared with the rest of the X-Men, much to everyone's surprise. 6 months have passed, and there is still no news from the X-Men who disappeared from that fateful day. Grief-stricken, Forge continues his search for the X-Men, but slowly loses hope of finding them. Suddenly, Bishop walks in on him and explains how they must save the X-Men who were pulled into the time stream. Jean and Cyclops end up in the future, where a young Nathan leads the surviving Ascani clan. Meanwhile, Charles, Magneto, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and Beast end up in the past, where they meet En-Sabah-Nur, an ancient warrior, later to become the ruthless Apocalypse. Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos, and make sure to subscribe and tap the bell to be notified about our latest videos. See you next time.